Rayman, Rayman 2 The Great Escape, and Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc. 3 games with the limbless hero, and 3 successes by most metrics. Coming out of 2003, we could be sure of one thing. This character was far from finished, and these games would soon find themselves with yet another little sibling. Only thing is, no, they didn't. He didn't entirely disappear, but the games featuring him changed, to say the least. They went from platformers to party games with the release of Rayman, Raving Rabbids. The identity found in this game was distinctly different from what we had come to expect of Rayman, not just mechanically, but in character too. Indeed, the Rabbids were more the star than Rayman himself this time, and a couple of games later he was dropped from the franchise entirely. Now, it's worth saying that the Rabbid games are generally considered to be solid and well designed. They weren't half-assed cash grabs. All the same, many fans of Rayman simply weren't interested in this sort of game and wanted to see their hero come back into the spotlight where he belonged. Personally, I never paid much mind to these games. My attention wasn't on Rayman anymore by the time they came out, and I didn't even know they existed until a few years after this phase was over. Even if I had known though, they just don't seem like my sort of thing. Where this story gets messy is that we know Rayman 4 was in development at some point. A trailer way back in the day had told fans to expect it, and showed it off as a sort of action beat-em-up platformer. On more recent news, at the end of 2022, Rayman 4's source code was leaked by Twitter user Ribshark, providing a playable version for the public, containing full controls for Rayman, several levels, and even a level editor. I haven't played it because, I haven't played it, but watching some other videos has shown that new mechanics such as mana and mounts were included in the build as well. And on top of that, a system where Rayman can grab something in the distance using his disjointed hand and pull it towards him, which if you watched my Rayman 2 video, you may remember that this is exactly the sort of thing I want to see with a character like him. Embrace his unique physical traits. And finally, as the enemy designs clearly show, the Rabbids behind closed doors were first created right here in Rayman 4. Exactly why it was abandoned and Raving Rabbids came out instead is not something I found an answer to. Maybe they felt like the platformer genre was going out of fashion, as it did seem like it was generally on a decline leading up to this moment. Or conversely, perhaps they predicted that party games would soon be gaining popularity after the Wii released, which was advertised a little more favoring household family games over other types. And, as I have to admit, maybe it was just as simple as this is the game they wanted to make. Regardless of the reason, the Rabbids ended up growing more and more, while Rayman seemed to find himself further and further away from relevance. When discussing the game where Rayman was cut from the franchise, Rabbids Go Home, in May of 2009, the creative director, Jacques Zerte, assured us that Rayman would appear again in a more imaginative and fantastic adventure instead. All the same, for the rest of that year we would hear nothing more of Rayman, and it really felt like his platformers would be a thing of the past. And then, out of the blue at E3 2010, this little game was announced, with Michel Ancel once again at the helm. For those awaiting Rayman's return, this must have been a hugely exciting moment. Unfortunately, the announcement still didn't end up being a certainty that his games would be coming back. Rayman Origins was first presented as an episodic game, with the first such episode to be released later that same year. This didn't happen, and the game went quiet instead. Not until the very end of 2010 was the silence finally broken, but even then just to announce that more info would come in 2011. And after that, for the first 4 months there was barely anything outside a short mention that it was still being worked on. But finally, when May rolled around, we got confirmation that it had been upgraded to a full retail release in its own right, and later that year, at long last, a new Rayman platformer was ready to be played. I cannot imagine a Rayman release would have been treated like this in the 90s or the start of the noughties, but it seems like in 2010 this mystery was considered acceptable. I think it is quite clear that Ubisoft wanted to keep the hype on other titles. This was the time of the Ezio trilogy after all. Perhaps this contributed to Rayman Origins' relatively disappointing sales despite good reviews. But the game was not without value to Ubisoft. It proved out something new. UbiArt Framework, a new development software intended for 2D games with a focus on art and ease of use. The fundamental idea was to make it simple and quick for both artists and designers to make something new, put it in the world, test it out, and modify it as needed, as explained by Chris McEntee in the sourced video. Michel Ancel had intended for it to become a free open-source software to encourage creativity elsewhere. This has not happened though. It seems Ubisoft had other ideas. Regardless, Rayman was back, and back to 2D where he had originally thrived, and soon we would see if the magic came back with him. Well, you probably already have your own opinions on that. but I'll explore it myself in another video soon. Hope to see you there.